The price, the consequences of infidelity will eventually be felt by all cheaters. But occasionally, the price is too great, and to be honest, I wouldn't want even my greatest enemy to suffer such vengeance. The doctor informed me that my child was born with a deformity after I endured an agonizing 18-hour labor. I was too exhausted to even weep or scream, and I was left stunned. Not even my spouse was someone I wanted to talk to. I just wanted to be alone. I kept quiet for hours while I thought back on my life and considered what I might have done differently. It was heartbreaking to find out that my child had a medical problem after going through terrible labor pains. I can't understand why my spouse had to endure the agony of having a child with a birth defect, so I hold myself responsible for everything that went wrong. My thoughts were interrupted by the knock. Our child could live with a bone marrow transplant, the specialist informed me. The doctor told me that our baby's bone marrow did not match ours. In an effort to protect our child, they chose to begin by asking me who the biological father was before breaking the news to my husband, in the hopes that this would be my opportunity to spare my husband the heartache of having a kid with health problems. I bowed my head and covered my feelings with a smile. I knew I had to tell him straight out that I had betrayed him. I don't remember my birth parents at all, nor do I know anything about my adoption when I was just 3 years old. I was taken into the house of a kind couple who gave me the stability and affection I sorely needed. I created an everlasting link with my forever family the instant I met them, and I was aware that our paths were intended to cross. I have worked at this hospital and am now the most well-known psychologist in this city because of my parents' upbringing. My name is now well known among the support personnel and medical professionals. My parents taught me the value of returning the favor to people who have helped me along the way. I have therefore actively participated in charitable endeavors, especially those that promote causes pertaining to children's welfare and education. Throughout my life, I contributed some of my time to helping at the orphanage where I was raised. I gave advice and support to kids who had gone through similar things as me. I had access to my family files, which contained details about my parents and other family members, but I never felt obliged to look at them. I was content that my present parents were raising me and my life was flourishing. I had no desire to go into my past and uncover its mysteries. I was afraid of upsetting my current guardians by looking for my biological parents. Even though I didn't mean to hurt them, it didn't seem possible that my biological parents actually loved and cared for me because they wouldn't have abandoned me in a children's orphanage. Feeling bewildered, I asked the doctor to call my husband so I could speak to him alone about my betrayal and lack of faithfulness. My husband hurried to me as soon as he got there, trying to calm me down with a kiss and an embrace. Even though his generosity only made me feel worse about myself, I forced myself to sit down and tell him what I had to say. Initially, I identified Charlie as the man who was my child's biological father. I went on to say that he was one of my patients at a hospital where I worked as a medical professional. Nevertheless, we became closer with time, and our relationship developed into a friendship. After a while, our relationship changed, and we had an intimate night together. This trend persisted, and even though we were married, we were involved in a physical relationship. I didn't hesitate to tell my husband that I had committed several infidelity-related offenses. Furthermore, I had no idea who might be the child's father when I became pregnant. The results were definitive when I collected a lock of my husband's and Charlie's hair and sent it to the lab for a paternity test. Our child's biological father was, in fact, Charlie. I worked up the guts to tell my spouse that I was sorry for cheating on him. However, Charlie was eager to deny any responsibility for the child when I told him about the pregnancy. He then proceeded to ask me whether I was still interested in having sex with him, which was a very bold move. I snapped at him in the heat of the moment, yelling a litany of curse words and requesting that he get out of my life. To my horror, he seemed unfazed by my tirade and left with no regret at all. After this experience, I had to make a tough choice about my pregnancy. I knew that I could not bring myself to end the pregnancy, regardless of the circumstances surrounding the conception. Then I understood that my husband had the most generous and compassionate heart I had ever met. As a token of respect for someone who is so loving and caring, I deliberately chose to name my child after my husband. "I'm not generous enough to forgive your betrayal," he roared, getting to his feet. He stormed out of the room before I could say another word. I had to get in touch with Charlie since he was my last option for saving my child. There was nothing more I could do. I offered him a ring, putting aside my ego and pride. When I told him about the child's deformity and that my husband had left me, he surprised me by arriving right away. Charlie made it clear as soon as he got there that he would not be responsible for my child's care. While my parents were out of town, Dad nevertheless helped me. When I told him about the bone marrow condition, I didn't think he would consent to the test so quickly. He stated unequivocally that he needed time to make a transplant decision. I told him it would be okay. I was going over the reports after a few testing iterations when I made an unexpected discovery. I was a sibling of Charlie. At first, I ignored the document and wrote it off as a potential mistake or oversight. All I could think about was saving my kid. But as I read the records, I saw that after they both took a quick glance at me, a pathology department nurse had hurriedly told the attending physician about our familial link. I had plenty to cope with, so I decided not to inquire about it. But the doctor came over to me and asked to speak with me for 2 minutes. I refused at first, but as he persisted, I grudgingly set aside my work and turned to him. I was irritated by his request to sit down since I wanted to concentrate on my child's needs. The doctor then went on to tell me about the paper I had just thrown away as I sat down. It was more than trash, which surprised me. Rather, it included test findings that had confused Charlie's and my samples with those of another patient. The test shockingly showed that we were related. I reacted with a facepalm since I couldn't believe it and insisted that it was impossible for a number of reasons. First of all, I have no biological siblings because I was adopted. Second, what if Charlie and I were born in the same month and year? My chat was interrupted by the doctor. Since I am a doctor myself, he counseled me to have faith in science and its correctness. But I reminded him that my parents wouldn't have revealed my adoption and any possible siblings if they had sought to hide anything from me. I used the chance to tell Charlie about the bug when he inquired about it. He never mentioned his family or personal life to me. We would just get into bed together and then carry on with our regular lives. Charlie had been standing there when he abruptly lost his balance and sat down on the nearby chair during my news break. I asked him if he was all right and offered him some water out of concern for his health. Neither of my questions received a response from him. He hesitated for a moment before opening up to me and telling me that he was also an adoptive child. As I strained to comprehend what was happening, I experienced a moment of disbelief. I couldn't get rid of the feeling that everything would soon come to an end, and it felt like I was stuck in an endless nightmare. Instead of giving me a direct response when I asked him why he had withheld this information from me, he responded with a rhetorical question. He questioned how, even if he had told me about his adoption sooner, we would have realized that we were siblings. Additionally, he emphasized that we were not romantically linked, reminding me of the nature of our connection. He reminded me that we were merely casual sexual partners in order to make clear the nature of our connection. And what about it should I keep in mind? However, I was unable to get rid of the unsettling sensation that gripped me. Since it was not yet confirmed and there was a possibility that it was a human error, I requested him not to bring it up again. When I asked about his orphanage to find out more, I was shocked to discover that it was the same one where I had spent the first 3 years of my life. We had to visit that orphanage in order to learn the truth. Every step I made as we got closer to the orphanage seemed unbearably heavy. It was nearly impossible to endure the weight of the uncertainty. When I first arrived, I found that everyone knew who I was, which made it hard to blend in. Sister Nancy was stationed in the records section, so I headed straight there. She looked surprised at my sudden appearance when I asked to see all of my old files. Her pupils widened in astonishment as she glanced at me blankly as I asked her about my file. Sister Nancy seemed taken aback by my abrupt request to view my papers and inquired as to what had transpired to cause me to reconsider. My sudden curiosity was surprising because I had previously refused her invitation to look over my records. She told me that because my information was so old, it would take around 30 minutes to get it out of the archival storage. The 30 minutes Charlie and I had to wait while she got it felt like an agonizingly long hour. I was anxious and excited every second that passed, so when Sister Nancy eventually brought my file back, it was a relief. Eager to learn the truth, I jumped up to grab the file from Sister Nancy as soon as she came into the room with it. I excitedly opened it up without even checking to see whether it was my file. I was shocked to learn that I had been left at the orphanage by my biological mother. I had a twin brother who was with me when I was abandoned, the file also disclosed. The orphanage took the painful decision to divide us up and send us to different families because, regrettably, no one was interested in adopting twins. The caregivers at the orphanage thought that since we were so young when we were separated, we wouldn't remember the first 3 years of our lives or each other. For this reason, they asked that our adoptive parents keep our twin status a secret. In the end, their assumption proved to be accurate, and we were raised unaware of one another's existence. Charlie left the room without even touching the file when I gave it to him. My child was in his care, so I hurried after him and begged him to go back to the hospital. There was no trace of regret or shame in Charlie's eyes as he stared coldly and heartlessly at my begging look. He cynically said that since it would have been difficult to tell him who his parents were, it was best if my child didn't make it. I was forced to leave the orphanage and go back to the hospital with nothing since I had to spawn in solitude. Charlie would not help me or my kid at all. Upon my arrival at the hospital, the doctor broke the heartbreaking news that my child had died. I haven't had a time to process the latest news, so I feel like the cosmos is against me. Before my parents embraced me, I wasn't sure whether I was still alive, but then I knew I was. I told my mother about everything that had happened in my life during the last few days. I was afraid my parents would abandon me as my husband, Charlie, and my child did, but they stick by me through it all. Despite the fact that my parents are wonderful people and gave me a wonderful upbringing, I regrettably got all of the bad traits from Charlie's brother and both of my biological parents. I was the sole person at my child's funeral. Neither Charlie nor my husband were present. I felt as though my child had paid the price for all of my transgressions when I was burying them. Going back to get my stuff from my husband was a difficult undertaking that took a lot of strength. I had no idea how to go about approaching him. Should I be honest with him about having his child after having an affair with my twin brother? And how had my brother left us both? The entire idea was too much to handle. I couldn't help but feel that this was my punishment for previously giving in to my urges, but sadly, my husband was there when I got there. I have the feeling that my past will come back to haunt me. I didn't want to put my parents through the embarrassment, so I turned down their invitation to accompany me. I had to take responsibility for the results of my actions. I said that I was there to get my things when my husband opened the door. He moved aside and let me into the house before he could say anything. I wasted no time in going directly to my room to begin packing. My spouse questioned about my child's health and welfare. He apologized after I told him that the baby had died. Then I went up to him and asked him why he was saying sorry. I would live the rest of my life regretting it, and it was my fault. Although he understood that I was going through a tough moment, he reminded me that my behavior had an impact on both him and myself. He acknowledged that hearing of my adultery wasn't easy for him and that he thought it would be best for us to part ways. Because he could never trust me again and didn't want to live his life doubting his spouse's fidelity, he intended to file for divorce. He was aware, nevertheless, that I was a believer in second chances. I've been living with my parents for the past 2 years after my divorce and the death of my child, depending on them to help me get by. I decided to quit my employment, where I first met Charlie, where I learned that Charlie was my brother, and where I had gone through the agony of losing my child. I don't plan on going back there ever again. I ran into my ex-husband, but I hadn't seen Charlie since our last meeting. I haven't seen him with another lady, and he seemed happy with his life. During lunch, I heard him laughing with his pals, and I can still hear the sound of his laughter. I know now that he didn't know I was here. I thought it would be better for him without me. He deserves a mate that will always be there for him and love him without conditions. Someone superior to me. I turned down my parents' offer to relocate and start over. No matter where I go, I have no doubt that my history will follow me around. I appreciate you listening to this tale. Here's another thrilling tale for you to peruse. This narrative, gentlemen, might make a Tarantino film plot. To be honest, I have no idea if that is factual or pure fiction. Let's listen, then. Hi there, I'm Jude. During my sophomore year of high school, I dropped out of school and moved in with my uncle, a reputable and skilled auto mechanic. I learned a lot about auto repair from him when I was a youngster. As I grew older and became an adult, a wide range of people from many social classes came to our program. I came to see that I was especially drawn to fixing injectors and doing other diagnostic tests to find possible issues with automobiles. I particularly enjoy tinkering with very old vehicles. I'm not sure why, but they're my favorites. As I developed my abilities, I finally chose to focus on solving issues with injectors and turbos. Even though I was skilled at fixing other parts of cars, I decided to specialize in injectors, turbos, and auto diagnostics, which quickly became my specialty. After moving to Hampshire, I set up a small workshop. Before long, my work's caliber started drawing in people looking for repairs and diagnostics. Happy clients started referring me to their friends and family, and before I knew it, my workshop was booming. I ultimately married Shirley, my wife, after meeting her in Hampshire. Shirley worked for a manufacturing company that produced a wide range of products, mostly building materials. Shirley's outstanding communication abilities and outgoing personality helped her land the marketing manager position at her company very fast. Her outstanding work significantly improved the company's brand image. Shirley's supervisor, who frequently expressed pride and appreciation for her, was impressed by her skills and abilities. He also instructed the other employees to emulate her. When she brought gifts, bonuses, and special allowances from her employment home, I was overjoyed. Shirley was frequently commended and encouraged in every way, and it seems to have gotten to her head over time. On one occasion, her manager wrote me a note praising me for having such a bright and diligent wife who always gave her best. Her perception of me seems to have shifted to one of being too little, unimportant, and nondescript. She began making fun of and degrading me because I wasn't doing well in school. During my adolescent years, I had a hard time understanding my teachers and became very distasteful of the educational system. My ability to speak effectively in English was hampered by this. I told her, however, that although I am not very good at communicating in English, I am quite knowledgeable about my field and consider myself to be among the best. I was a trustworthy individual with a strong will. I told her that utilizing compound phrases alone is insufficient to maintain our family, even though she frequently used them to mock me whenever we spoke at home. I was in charge of making sure that everything we needed, including her jewelry, underwear, and cosmetics, was taken care of as I was the leader of the family. Both of our children were enrolled in high school. When I made grammatical mistakes during our chats, Mom and the children would laugh, smile, and make fun of me. When I made a mistake, they laughed. Everyone joked about it, but I never cared. However, she frequently remarked that I smelled bad when I got home from work, likening me to gasoline or the lubricants we use in the workshop. Even if I had already had a shower, she would frequently ask me to do it again before we went to bed. She frequently used this as a pretext to avoid having sex with me. It continued for some time until we got into a heated argument about it. She started taking advantage of me under the guise of work-related activities, even though I had never been violent or cruel to her. I grew enraged with her and resolved to inflict pain on her in order for her to acknowledge her error. She momentarily became less combative and more submissive when she saw I was serious. Our relationship deteriorated further after she was elevated to the city's branch manager job. She would blame her heavy workload at work for her early departures and late returns. She traveled with her boss and had several meetings with him, asserting that they were both speaking on behalf of the business. She demonstrated that her boss meant more to her than I did one Saturday. I had to take our kids to their set of music lesson before I could go to my workshop. I told her to pick them up when they were done, which was at midday. She hastily muttered that she had a business meeting with her boss when I called from the workplace to check if they had gone home. Then she requested that I come get the kids instead. I wanted to break the multimeter I was holding because I was so furious. I made the decision to go over to her supervisor and tell him to stop bothering my wife. I questioned, what the hell are they doing at work on a day off, since I couldn't see why they had to work on the weekends. To my astonishment, neither my wife nor her employer were in their office when I hurriedly drove there. She hadn't visited the office, according to the employees who were on duty when I queried them. I discovered that my wife was secretly having an affair with her supervisor. I had previously suspected this of her, but she vehemently denied it and even got into a heated argument with me. On the contrary, her behaviors and demeanor indicated otherwise. Numerous warning signs were present. I hurried to get the kids and head back home. She showed up later that night, had a shower, and went to bed as if nothing had happened. I was incensed as I sat on the couch thinking about her rude behavior, disrespect for our marriage, and betrayal. She was lying on her stomach, looking avidly at her phone when I entered the living room. I sighed, gasping for air, and said, "Who's in charge of this house, your damn boss or me?" I attempted to take the phone away from her. She asked, "What's wrong with you?" as she hurried to the other side of the bed and got to her feet. "Where have you been all day?" I shot back. She asked, "What do you mean?" In response, "I told you that I was at a business meeting with my boss," she added. "On your day off, what the devil kind of meeting did you attend?" "I was in your office, and they told me you never came there," I retorted angrily. In response, we headed downtown to check out our new location. "Show me the photos," I replied, demanding proof. "I must be kidding," she said with a laugh. I persuaded her to have photographic proof on her phone if she was telling the truth. After telling me it wasn't required, she moved to the window on the opposite side of the room when the phone rang. She apparently got a call from her supervisor. I approached her and remarked as soon as she had finished speaking, "I am aware that you and your fucking employer are having an affair behind my back." I assured her that there would be repercussions after I caught them in the act. But she went on the defensive almost away, accusing me of cheating on her with my female employees and apprentices. I was aware that she was only attempting to shift the blame and hide her own transgressions. She complains, but I still believe she betrayed me. Her boss showed up in his car one day when I was working in the workshop. I was able to identify the signs of an injector malfunction when he explained the car's problems. I quickly verified my suspicions by running a diagnosis. He was told to get out of the car with me and come back in 2 or 3 hours. But his voice showed his nervousness and concern as he begged me to solve it as soon as possible. It was Thursday. He told me that he required the automobile for a number of events and meetings. On the next day, I laughed and told him it wouldn't be an issue. I gave his automobile priority care even though there were several other cars waiting for repairs that day and the weekend was drawing near. Before he left, I pleased him by promising to have it fixed by evening. On the back seat, I discovered an earring that looked remarkably identical to the one I gave my wife for our 10th anniversary when I first started working on his car. I quickly took the earring out and looked it over. I had no question that it was my wife's property. The surprises didn't stop there, though. I was trying to get the back seat off so I could reach the fuel pump underneath it when I noticed my wife's underwear on the floor, almost hidden under the right front seat. The stab wound was to the back. My heart was broken, and I was in shock. My suspicions were all validated. I was shocked to see how foolish and irresponsible she was. I briefly considered the possibility that karma was catching up with them if they hadn't taken care to conceal such evidence in the automobile. How often does leaving women's underwear in your car require you to be a cretin or simply a moron? His children would have discovered them if his wife had discovered them, or worse. I was upset with both of them, but especially with my wife. She repeatedly vowed to me that she was not unfaithful to me and accused me of being unfaithful to her. In front of our kids, she continuously made fun of and degraded me. I knew it was time to present my wife with the indisputable proof. It would be a waste of my time and energy, so I quickly threw aside the thought of questioning her boss and even hitting him in the face if he dared to deny his involvement. Since cheaters frequently fabricate lies to hide their traces, convicting them is a challenging undertaking. I considered what I should do next to finally end this deception and exact my retribution. I was momentarily unsure of what to do. A light bulb appeared above my head as I was leaving the car to get a glass of water. Suddenly, like lightning, an idea struck me. I understood that by setting them up in his car, I could completely reverse the situation. It was a great idea, and I immediately started working on resolving the injector issue while surreptitiously tampering with the brakes later that night. My wife told me she was leaving the office with her boss because they had an urgent trip when I got home. My wife assured me that since her trip was only a quick stop in a nearby town, I shouldn't worry too much about it. Her sarcastic remarks hurt, but I ignored them and sat down on the couch. I made breakfast for us the next morning so I could browse on my phone. However, she was in such a hurry that she hardly had time to eat a piece of bread or drink her tea. She rushed to her office after leaving the house. They actually traveled to a nearby city to check out the property for their branch, as it turned out. This will soon be evident. On the way back, an intriguing incident occurred, and my work on his car's brakes was crucial to the movie. These folks made the decision to play about as they were driving back. In an attempt to win his approval, my wife unbuttoned his fly. It seems that her supervisor was so taken aback that he forgot she was driving. The vehicle then lost control and leaped out directly in front of their car, as if they were in a movie. The trailer's driver tried to move and maneuver it. However, the result was chaos. Unfortunately, it appeared that he noticed the danger too late and used the brakes too near the trailer, causing them to fail, while driving on the other side of the road to avoid colliding with them. In the end, their car slid beneath the trailer's side. Both were discovered immobile when the rescue team arrived to remove them from the debris. They also found something unusual in Pekin. They observed that my wife had suffocated after choking on his genitalia. For this reason, I believe that their driving stunt had these effects. Naturally, I took part in that. The rescue staff tried to resuscitate them, but they didn't respond. They were sent immediately to a neighboring hospital. Although her boss was successfully revived, the crash rendered him impotent, and Shirley was tragically declared dead. This was an embarrassing development. I felt a little bad that my revenge plan had worked out just the way I had planned, even if they deserved it. I hit the target. Right then, I was more concerned about the impact this loss would have on my kids than anything else. Finding out that their mother perished in a horrific automobile accident while having sex with her boss would be too upsetting for them. I had trouble figuring out how to communicate it to them because it was an unexpected occurrence. I made arrangements for her body to be taken out of the hospital so that it could be buried privately. She had died in a disgusting and horrifying way, and karma had caught up with her. I told her family that she had passed away, but I didn't tell them how she had choked. Since the news was already widely known, I figured they would ultimately find out. I consented to carry her body to her native state at her family's request. In an effort to put the incident behind me and out of consideration for her family and my kids, I went to her burial, where she was buried, and then I went home. Her boss is still in the hospital and would really like to speak with me, I was told when I returned. At first, I thought about turning him down because my plan of retaliation had been perfectly carried out. Later on, though, I changed my mind and consented to see him. Maybe he wanted to share some unknown information. He was in the emergency ward, and I was led there. He was unable to move much and was confined to his bed. He tried to sit up when he spotted me, but in order to prevent making his discomfort worse, I advised him to stay motionless. He begged me to forgive him while speaking softly and with tears running down his cheeks. He acknowledged that ever since he elevated my wife from chief marketing officer to branch manager, he had been having affairs with her. He acknowledged that he was a devoted Christian and that his fear of God and guilty conscience had caused him to think about quitting the affair. My wife, however, convinced him to go on. She assured him that God would not be upset with him because they would not be discovered. He bemoaned and regretted his heinous deeds, wondering why he had degenerated to such a low level given his standing as a revered deacon in his church, a man many looked to for guidance and support. I sat there as he gradually explained everything, and I listened in shock. After a few weeks, he was released from the hospital that day and went home. He had to apologize to his wife and kids for all he had done for a long time because they were extremely embarrassed by what he had done. I later learned that his impotence was the reason for his wife's divorce. She moved to a different city with their kids after falling in love with another man. He was also suspended from his position as a church deacon and degraded from his position in the corporation. As I proceeded through life as the only caregiver, I committed to giving my two kids strong moral and ethical values. They entered college after graduating from high school a few years later. Thankfully, both of them were accepted to study law and engineering. My daughter chose to study public law and arbitration before my son, who later joined her at the same university to focus on civil engineering. My children's accomplishment made me very happy. I thought about getting married again at one point, but I was always hesitant. I was delivering a car to a customer one day when I noticed an automobile that had broken down a few meters in front of me on a desolate roadway. I drove up to this wrecked car without hesitation. A nice woman sitting in front of the motionless car caught my attention. She appeared helpless. She didn't appear to know who to call for help or what to do next. It was already getting dark and the sun was lowering. I smiled as I approached her, curious to find out what might be wrong. As I got closer, I noticed a flicker of optimism on her face. You seem to be having issues with your vehicle, I inquired in a stifled and apprehensive manner. She clarified that she had tried everything to restart the automobile after it abruptly stopped. She pleaded with me to help her in any way so she could get out of there. This road appears to be empty and calm, and I'm new to the area. It's getting dark already, she grumbled. I assured her that everything would be all right and advised her not to worry. Then I asked her to open the hood by pulling the release lever. After she complied with my request, I checked the injector nozzles and discovered that they were in good shape. I discovered that the alternator had broken down and was unable to sufficiently charge the battery after checking the battery and alternator. As a result, the combustion chamber was devoid of spark. Since it was already becoming dark, I hastily put a temporary fix in place to restart the vehicle. In order for her to get home safely, I told her to accompany me. She took us to her apartment once we arrived at the location where I had left my car. I was going to find out where she lived so I could pick up the car the next day and fix it. She was overjoyed that I had helped her get home safely. Before I left, we traded contact details. I picked up the car the next day and gave it a comprehensive repair for her. We were familiar with one another over time. My admiration for her only grew as she went above and above for my kids. She constantly wanted to be around them and loved their company. Remarkably, she was also a state representative for a global organization that supported foster homes and orphanages. She tragically lost her spouse in an aircraft crash within a year of their marriage, and she has been unmarried ever since. After a year, we decided to be married after falling in love. Daniel, our kid, was a blessing in our marriage. My comment: fantastic film script, dude. I hope the narrative isn't based on actual occurrences. Remember, gentlemen, that I need your strong likes on my small channel. There will be less cheats in the world if you support it with every like.